Hello and welcome to another GateDrop.com podcast. I'm Jonathan McCready. With me is Andrew McKinstry, and we are going to discuss the 2023 MS Supercross season. And it ended pretty spectacularly, but in a way slightly disappointing with the fact that it was a three-rider fight for the championship, and by the end there was only one rider left standing, and that rider is Chase Sexton. You could say he deserved it on speed, but for Cooper Webb and Eli Tomac, this is going to be a particularly tough championship to look back on in their careers.
Absolutely. I mean, Supercross this year for 14 out of the 17 rounds was very, very exciting. And even the last three rounds, they were exciting but for the wrong reasons, you would probably say. You would have liked to see all the three contenders stay fit until the end of the season. Who knows what way it would have went. But the way it went, as you said, last man standing, Chase Saxon. I think we do have to give him credit because, racing these days, championships are so long. The first point is to stay injury free. Obviously, the other two had freak incidents, I would say, but he was able to stay injury free. And even though he threw a couple of wins away earlier in the season, he was there at the end of the season to pick up the pieces. So congratulations to him on his first 450 Supercross title. And who knows, there could be many more to come from him.
And just looking at the facts here, season wins for Chase Sexton was 6, Eli Tomac 7. Now, obviously, Eli could argue he was out front in Denver. He maybe would have won that race. But laps led 124 for Sexton, 97 for Tomac. So, speed wise, I think Chase can lay claim to that he was the best, or at least the fastest. Maybe the best was Eli because when he could win, he won. He didn't make that many mistakes, a couple here and there, but it looked like at that point he was managing the championship. And for Cooper Webb, he only won two races and he actually only led 12 laps. But until that crash, he was very much in it as well. But the last four rounds or so from the mud race, everything seemed to ebb and flow in extreme terms from them because if you remember, Chase actually had the start and Justin put him down in that main event, Justin Barcia. Previous to that, in the practice, Eli Tomac had went down, and you wondered if he was going to even be able to race, and if he was able to race, how fit would he be? At that point, the door seemed very much open for Webb and Sexton. When Sexton got the whole shot, it looked like Sexton was going to be back in the championship and make a lot of points. In the end, he got put down by Barcia. Tomac got on the podium. He created that 11-point gap to Cooper Webb. And I think that was part of the reason Webb was so aggressive with Eli in the heat race, because one corner, the second turn essentially in the heat race, he decided to try and rattle Tomac by going in for that aggressive pass. That created Webb to go wide in the next corner because he thought Tomac was going to give him some payback. That's when his front wheel went over the berm, and then he ended up getting hit by Adam Cincerello, who couldn't do anything about it. So that was Webb out. Pretty unfortunate, but I think the circumstances of the mud race created a scenario in Webb's head where he felt he had to put pressure on Eli even in the heat race because his practice times and everything hadn't been that good. His race speed hadn't been that good in terms of Cooper Webb. And he tried to make something happen there. And it backfired, but it didn't so much backfire because he crashed in the heat race. It backfired obviously because of the unlucky situation with Adam that came from the crash. So that was Webb out. From there, it looked like Eli had this thing under control. I mean, you're leading at home. You're in Denver, Colorado. You've all but sealed the title. You basically just have to not get hurt. And then to get injured in that way, which was a freak way to get injured, his Achilles snapping on a fairly bog standard for his level rhythm section. And you could see the pain straight away. The foot came straight off the footrest. He knew and rode straight back, explained that he couldn't push his bike back through the tunnel. And if that's the end of his career, it has to be one of the most staggering ways for a legend of the sport and one of the best riders of all time, one of the best American riders ever, to leave the sport on the brink of his third title. It's something I think that will stay with fans of the sport forever, or at least until they die.
Yeah, absolutely. Unbelievable way for the championship to end, really. And it just goes to show it's never over until it's mathematically over. And if you're second or third in the championship and you still have a chance, it's never over until you get that, until you're celebrating and you mathematically have won that championship. And that just proves it. In terms of Eli now, obviously, I don't think he's going to make a decision just yet, but probably 5 or 6 weeks when he's dealing with this injury and and probably starting to think what's the future going to hold for him. He's got it's basically two decisions to make. Is he happy, achieving so much he has in the sport to leave now, and that's his last memory? If he can get over that, it could be the last time we maybe see him race. But if he doesn't want to go out like that, who knows? We could see him back. But whether he can make it back for January after such a big injury, who knows? Because I mean, even in football, Achilles, you're
Yeah,
out for about a year. So it's all the pieces will have to fall together from to make a recovery. But yeah, as a fan of the sport and somebody that loves the sport, hopefully we can see it back in action. And of course, it puts a dampener in the AMA outdoors as well because everyone was
big
so
time.
excited to see Eli and Jet go at it as well, and obviously Chase.
Yeah, it's sort of thrown a spanner in every series, really. The end of the Supercross series was thrown, even for the Honda guys. Chase and the team didn't really celebrate it that much in Denver. I think A, through shock, and B, through respect for Eli, because you don't really want to win it that way. Although if it's given to you, you're going to take it, but it's still not the ideal way to do it. Chase had made a few mistakes of his own, and ironically, at that time, he seemed to have sorted everything out. He had the speed, he wasn't making those crashes. He said he'd made adjustments to the front end of the bike with suspension, and he seemed to be on his A game. But by the time he got there, Eli was able to kind of pick and choose his battles. So it was just unfortunate to see that. I think it's something that'll be burned in most people's brains. Eli's exit from the championship. We have 3 championships, probably at least $1 million in prize money. At least he did get that legacy of second in the Supercross series all-time winners. So when he looks back, I'm sure it was still worth his while racing this season. There was talk he was going to retire before that, but he's extended his career to that level. But to be so close to that third title, it's got a sting. And again, outdoors, he wasn't supposed to do it at all. He put his name in the hat for that again. And then, as you say, we're not going to get sort of to see the battle of the new generation, the old generation with Jet Lawrence and Eli Tomac. Obviously, Dylan Ferrandis and Chase Sexton are going to be very, very fast as well. But that was Jet's probably one chance to race Eli, and it's not going to happen now. Although we did get to race him at Des Nations Final Moto, but Eli didn't get to start that race, so we didn't get to see the duel really. But for Jet and for the fans, it's disappointing, but obviously not any more disappointing than it is for Eli Tomac. You could see him shaking his head there, and I think everyone was shaking their head. It was disbelief, really, whenever you've seen it. Even the commentators barely knew what to say.
I know, unbelievable way for it all to end, literally. But yeah, just on Chase Sexton. Obviously, it's not the way you want to win the title, but I think this will help him stay motivated and keep motivated because obviously he won this title, and while he would have preferred to have won it with all his two main rivals staying injury free and winning it that way, I think the motivation now looking forward, he can tick that one off. He can say he's won a 450 Supercross title now, but the motivation now will be to win another one when hopefully all his rivals stay injury free, and then I'm sure that would maybe even mean more to him than maybe his first one because looking back, like obviously no one can take that away from him. He thoroughly deserved it, but he'll know looking back, the story behind the season. And
Mhm.
obviously next year we're going to have Jet and him probably going at it. Chase probably going to be with a different manufacturer, most likely going to KTM. So he'll probably want to give KTM a Supercross title and try and do two in a row. Whether or not he can do it, it's going to be very, very difficult. But who knows? Because as you have highlighted earlier with the stats, I don't think there's any question that he was probably the quickest this year. If you look at the
Yeah,
whole season, he just threw it down the track a few times, and if he hadn't done that, then he would have put himself in a
he
situation
would
where he
get
might have
yeah.
actually been able to win the title anyway. So but he's still young and he just needs to learn from those mistakes and he's got a bright future ahead of him for sure, even with Jet moving up.
And to win a title with Honda, at least for my era growing up, it's pretty significant. It's probably the most glamorous team to win a Supercross title with. They've been waiting for 20 years. Ricky Carmichael, amazingly, in '03, I think it was the last guy to win a title with Honda. Before that, it was Jeremy McGrath, Jean-Michel Bale, Jeff Stanton, Rick Johnson, David Bailey, Johnny O'Mara. So you've almost a who's who of Supercross legends. And for Chase to have his name attached to that brand as a Supercross winner has to be pretty spectacular and end the losing streak, as it were. Along with that, for Honda, you have the Lawrence brothers both winning their titles. And to go 20 years without a Premier Supercross championship to then win all three in one season, it was almost like the long wait was worth it for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, there it's been a while, but now they've won one with Chase, and with the Lawrence brothers coming up, they'll be looking for plenty more, and there's no reason why they can't do it. Obviously, starting with this outdoor championship, obviously that's not the main goal in America, as Supercross is, but if Chet can start off or even running at the front of the AMA Nationals, it'll make him feel confident and feeling good heading into the 2024 Supercross season, and certainly he's got the speed. There's no doubt about that. If he can keep it on two wheels and be consistent throughout the whole season, who knows? Honda, maybe not. Jackson might not be able to make it two in a row, but Honda might be able to.
Yeah, it's going to be, you'd imagine a 66% chance if you include Dylan Ferrandis as the third guy that maybe could win that title. Jet and Chase are probably the two favourites. You've Hunter favourite in the 250s, I would imagine, probably over Cooper and maybe Tom Vial, although it depends where his confidence is and bike setup is going into a new series after Supercross. But certainly Honda have the prospect of going 1, 2, and 450s and coming away with a 250 national title again, which I think would be the third in a row with Jet winning the previous two. So Honda are on a roll. As you mentioned, it looks like they might actually be losing Chase. So if he goes to KTM, KTM have somehow come up smelling of roses with Cooper getting injured. He looks likely to move to Yamaha potentially, and Chase has ended up ironically could be wearing the number one plate on a KTM in 2024, which for KTM is quite a strange situation to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. Silly season. That's the way these things go. But I think we've known for quite a while now that this decision was made between KTM and Saxon. So we just need something official now. Probably come after probably after his Honda contract runs out. So we'll probably still have to wait a while on it being official. But yeah, KTM were on the ball quickly there with Saxon, and obviously Honda have probably decided to focus on the Lawrence brothers for their future. At the time, you'd probably say a right decision, but with Chase being so good at Supercross this season, obviously even if Jed is amazing, they will miss him in some capacity. As both of them under the same awning would have been amazing, would have been really good. But both of them title contenders, and not you always don't see two title contenders with the
Yeah,
same brand, so it's understandable.
and that's what it'll make it. Probably salary wise too, the amount Jet will be getting. The other interesting thing that we've ended, well, Jet will actually be going against Chase, obviously his teammates this summer, but we'll probably not get to see that in Supercross next year. The thing we did miss out with Eli getting injured as well was the fact that Jet admitted that he and Hunter were going to ride at 250 in the 450 class at the last round to try and put bikes between them, Team Honda essentially, and Eli Tomac if the situation presented itself. That actually would have been pretty cool to see because if you look at the lap times, the Jets actually been the quickest in terms of overall laps of the 450s the odd time. And pace wise, with the amount of injured factory riders, there was no reason Jet or Hunter couldn't have been challenging for a podium.
Yeah, well, we'll never know now. That never materialized. But yeah, whether they would have wanted to get involved or not, like, is another story. I mean, obviously, they probably would have been told to race. It would have been probably Honda pushing it. Obviously, Jet's capable, but one lap around the Supercross track and a full main's completely different. But as you say, with the lack of depth there at the at the last round, especially with so many injuries, probably would have been knocking on the door, but whether they would have wanted to get involved in the championship battle is another thing. But yeah, that's just the way it goes. Obviously, we'll not have to wait long to see Jed on a 450 with the outdoors, and Hunter could potentially be joining him for the Supercross 2024 season. So not long to wait before we see them in the Premier class.
On the injuries, there's been a lot of talk about both MXGP and Supercross with the injuries this year, but specifically Supercross. There's been talk that there's too many races, the 450s are too fast. I think there might be an issue with the 450s, but if you look at even Ken Roxon, that Adam Bailey were Supercross, and every British, German, and French, Australian, and Singaporean fan holding their breath whenever he hurt his knee at the last round. Luckily, it looks like he'll be okay for World Supercross, but we Colt Nichols injured at times as well. But Eli Tomac's injury was pretty freak. Cooper Webb had a simple crash that he was fine with. He got run into. So the two main contenders there, and even Maxime Renault in MXGP, he got hurt without crashing. He just put his foot down. Jeffrey's got hurt without crashing before with his foot injury. Are the injuries been too much made of these injuries? Is it just a freak year? Because I remember in 03, I think there was only 3 or 4 factory riders as well, and that was with Chad Reid and Ricky Carmichael riding 250s. I think Ferry and maybe Fonseca made the whole season. So it does seem to fluctuate. You're always going to get injuries, but some of them are just freak injuries, while others are major. We've seen Dylan Ferrandis have a couple of big crashes. But what are your thoughts on whether the bikes are too quick, the tracks need to change, or is it just a freak year?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the bikes are definitely too fast for me. I've been saying that for a while now, and I
Mm-hmm.
definitely agree with that. But we're living in a world where we're never going to be able to slow them down. That's just the reality. The manufacturers don't want to slow them down. I think actually that has been a discussion, but the manufacturers are keen to keep improving and trying to get quicker. So yeah, that's just not going to happen, I'm afraid. But obviously, once things go all electric, that'll be another discussion, and what way the future goes, who knows? Um on the tracks. It's a funny one. A lot of people blame the MXGP qualifying races because Fevre and Renault both got injured in that race. As we found out after, Renault didn't even crash, and Fevre was just unlucky a start crash. Obviously, that can happen in any sort of race, but it was quite happy, or it was quite funny to see during the week Rick Elzinga and Simon Lagenfelder both picking
Yeah,
up injuries at the
practicing.
practice track. So it
Yeah.
just goes to show. I think it's pretty lazy just to blame qualifying races, and for people that saying that they're literally pointless this year, well, actually they're not because the top 10 get points. So I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure. I'm not sure where they're coming from there, and everyone likes to see racing. Supercross. Yeah, I would sort of like. There's a lot of dragging back and a lot of technicality at tracks these days. So potentially that might be a factor. Back in the
Like
early two
Barcia's
thousands,
crash,
maybe
yeah.
a lot of the tracks were maybe some of them were maybe like outdoor motocross tracks as opposed to everything being so supercrossy and so jumpy. So potentially I would like maybe a few tracks like that and maybe a few more tracks like Daytona would be nice. But yeah, it's just part of the sport, I'm afraid, and the sport that nobody likes, injuries, but it's always going to happen. That's just the way
And
it
I
is.
think maybe I was after 03, but those early 2000s had massive whips, and obviously everyone's on the 250. So was the 250 safer or going to bog with the carburetor? But I think they almost made the tracks a bit easier for the end of the 2000s. It started, I remember McGrath and Wyndham, I think it was 01-ish, 2000. The whips were pretty ridiculous. So maybe there is a balance between, you hear the top riders wanting technical tracks, but it tends to spread the racing out, although there's more opportunity to pass. But you don't want, like, look at Barcia's crash, missed time to dragon back and Endo face first in the next jump and all multiple injuries. It's going to, if it doesn't rule him out of outdoors at the start of the season, it's going to hinder his speed that he would have had at the start of the season. So it impacts him negatively on the series either way. So I think there is things that can do, but I still think there was a certain amount of break injuries as well. I mean, Eli and Cooper, they're getting the most, and Roxon to an extent are 3 of the top 5 in the championship, all injured at one point this season, but on Barcia, but really bar Barcia's one, the other 3 were pretty unlucky.
Yeah,
Roxon
exactly. I
just
mean,
stuck his foot out wrong, on this knee
yeah,
ping. So I think there's a balance to all these things. The other interesting thing we were just reading there was Chase Saxon style and technique. Certainly one of the best styles and technique ever seen in the sport, and probably up there. But Max, we're talking about how good his style was and is it the best ever? I would say it's one of the best ever, but AJ Catanzaro said that Stefan Evert's style and technique wasn't even close to Chase Saxon. I think he said the same for McGrath. And I would completely disagree with that because McGrath set the standard for Supercross with precision, staying low over the jumps, and Stefan Everett set the standard for motocross. And for me, America are just now catching up to Stefan's techniques that he's been doing throughout his whole career in the 90s and early 2000s. I feel like they're just seeing it. The GP guys took that on from what Stefan left. The likes of Roxon, the likes of Jorge Prado, so many GP riders stand up late into the corners on the pegs with great balance, riding the balls of their feet. That all came from Stefan Everett. And ironically, he looked at Johnny O'Mara and David Bailey, who had great technique in the 80s. McGrath and them had great technique in the 90s. But if you look at the guys that are winning championships now, you've Saxon, who to me looks like a GP rider the way he rides. I don't think that's a coincidence because he's grown up in the era where GP guys have moved to America and MXGP's got a lot more exposure. Jeffrey doesn't have that smooth technical style, but whenever you look the way he rides feet on the pegs, the corner speed, the momentum he carries through the turn, that's very GPS. It throws a bit more aggression into it, which is maybe a bit of an American compromise. But Jet Lawrence, Hunter Lawrence, Jorge Prado, all at one time or other coached by Harry Everts. Liam Everts, great technique, coached by Harry with Stefan. Stefan coached by Harry. So there's the thread of GP riders coaching and examples through the sheer brilliance of Stefan Everts' technique has actually came to America, but has came to America late. And now they seem to think that the new technique, which is actually an old technique from MXGP, is the future, which is quite ironic. But Chase certainly in style is fantastic to watch. But I would say Jet looks to me really like Stefan Everts. Obviously, there's certain subtleties of change because of the bikes and everything now, and 2023 isn't 1990 or even 2006. But Everts' technique was good enough to beat Prime James Stewart. So I don't think the techniques changed that much from then. And the basic of everything is still Stefan Everts' techniques. If you watch a video from 1990 or 92, his technique was perfect then for motocross. Jeremy's was perfect for supercross. And I think Chase has just put his version of that. To me, he's a wee bit like if you combine Kevin Windham and Stefan Everts, you probably have Chase Saxon because he rides with his elbows a bit lower like Windham. He can be smooth, but he also has that standing up late into the turns momentum that Stefan basically created in terms of MXGP racing as well. So he has one of the best styles. But I mean, you've Arno Tonis, great style. Joe Shimoda admitted that his dad got him to watch Stefan, and he's a modern rider. So I think the Stefan Everts thread is very heavily entered American motocross that maybe just haven't realised it yet.
Yeah, I mean, just on Chase Section, I've actually really enjoyed watching Chase Section. I interviewed him after they actually won at Red Bull, and I actually said to him, I actually quite like him watching you because when I'm watching you, I forget you're American sometimes because you ride like a GP rider.
Yeah.
And like I asked him who he looked up to, and he said he didn't really look up to anybody, but he tried to take a bit from everyone. And then obviously he's Chase Section at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
so he's going to keep his style. But I think it is quite interesting that he used to work with James Stewart, and obviously Chase like standing up, and that's his style. But I think obviously he ended up going away from that direction because I think James was maybe trying to get him to sit down a bit
Yeah,
more. Now,
want to sit down a bit more.
yeah, obviously in America, whenever we look at their motocross tracks, I understand why a lot of their riders don't ride with that technique because at those tracks, they're very fast, pin it, you know, and it, you kind of have to ride with a pin it to win its style. Whereas, in Europe, they ride with this style because the tracks get gnarly and rough, and
Mm-hmm.
standing up and being on the pegs is it's more efficient. It's the best way to ride these rough and gnarly tracks. Maybe you won't be the most aggressive guy, but aggression doesn't really reward you in GPs. You need to
Yeah,
be
exactly.
smart and pick your lines. In America, I think it's maybe hard to get that balance, but Chase Saxon has obviously made that work for him. And obviously, he's very unlucky not to win the AMA Nationals title last year, but he took it right down the wire with Eli Tomac. So it's nice to see a top an American rider ride with that style. I personally enjoy watching it, and also he rides a little bit different to the other Americans, so it's good to watch. One rider that I'm interested in seeing in the future is how Deegan develops, because
Yeah, he's good.
if to me his style would be more of maybe an Eli Tomac style, but it'll be interesting to see in the future if he keeps that style or he tries to go more smooth as well.
And I think he still has the basic techniques where he can stand up. He has the technique, but obviously, I think as you mentioned, Chase, he can still throw that American aggression in, but he has the smooth technique as well. From you would attribute to MXGP sort of style racing. And I think for Vial, that's going to be not to go into an outdoor preview, but for Vial, he's trying to have a smooth technical GP style, and then he'll maybe have to adapt some aggression into the outdoors for him. We've seen, I think I remember Lawrence's dad was saying the tracks like Washougal, he didn't really like as much. He wanted the tracks to get rough because that's when his boys' technique that they grew up learning in Australia and then laterally Europe with the sand really paid off compared to the Americans just pinning the throttle and holding on. But as you said, that's what worked for Rand Vanapolo and Ricky Carmichael, and there were the legends then, and the tracks reward that in America more. So Chase has probably got the perfect compromise now for a America, and you might see some of the GP guys having to become more aggressive. If Prado goes there, he might have to become more aggressive, even though his style is pretty much perfection. Watching him ride a bike, very similar to Jet Lawrence, but Jet's had the time to develop that sort of balance. But again, the likes of Prado, when he goes to America, he might have to adjust. Even the aggressive racing over there with Supercross, we've seen he doesn't really like that. Bar to bar kind of action can disrupt his rhythm, but if you let him get out front, nobody can really catch him. So you have that sort of balance, but Chase certainly is one of the nicest and most technical riders to watch there's been, but I wouldn't say Stefan Everts isn't close and that Jeremy McGrath isn't close, because I think they're the two base marks for Supercross and motocross technique that every rider can still use and apply. And if you apply what they're doing and put your own spin on it, you're going to be at the front if you have the talent as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to Stefan Everts, he was very, very unique. Until Jorge Prado came along, there wasn't really a rider that rode like obviously in bits, but the way Everts was so unique, like he was always on the pegs. I mean, Prado's, apart from him, a lot of GP riders are a bit more like Saxon, or Saxon's a bit more
Yeah,
like the
it's like
GP
more
riders.
compromise. Yeah.
But in terms of the way Stefan rode, Prado, until he came along, there was nobody really that took it to that level. Obviously, we've got Liam coming along, and watching him get his first podium there the other week, was it Narco? Can't remember the track now, but watching him was just like watching a young Stefan Everts as well, which is good to
And
see.
he got
It's
his
always
first
nice
podium
to
at
see that
Arco,
style.
so
Yeah, yeah,
said the
exactly.
symmetry was pretty
Yeah,
awesome. So
exactly.
yes, you have a lot of guys coming up with that on the peg style and GPs. I think Deegan, I think he's one of the standouts of the 250 class. Obviously, Hunter Lawrence, touching him quickly to finally get that title. Like, we have followed his career from GPs, the ups and downs of that, the potentially showed in GPs, then to almost have to take his last year in GPs was tough with the bike and everything. Injuries, he had more injuries in Supercross and outdoors, even though he won a couple of motos. Then Jet came into form. He kind of took the limelight away from Hunter. He was the main guy, and I think a lot of people forgot how good Hunter was and the potential he had. So to see him get that title, I think is rewarding, not just for Hunter, the family, and Honda in America and the fans there, but also everyone that's followed his career in GPs as well, because you feel you've seen that journey from the start really, and to see that come to fruition, that he'll always have that title now, and maybe two coming here in the outdoors, was pretty nice to see as well. But for Jet, it looked like he was riding at about 80% all year, and he's almost waiting to go to 450 to show the world his true potential.
I know, absolutely. I mean, kudos to the family. I think they did things the right way, coming from Australia, selling everything they had in Australia, going as a whole family, going to Europe. Um, I think they were based in France a majority of the time, times Belgium as well. And then, once they got the call to go to America, they sold everything in Europe, went to America and started there. I think if you're coming from Australia, that's what you probably have to do. You have to just go, leave, and no matter what, I'm going to succeed, and have that mindset that, you're not going to go home to Australia until, maybe you hang up the boots or whatever, or visit at Christmas time. But definitely done things the right way, and it's good to see all their hard work paying off now. Obviously, as soon as they came to Europe, we could see the potential they had. I remember Hunter Lawrence first EMX 250 race battling with Conrad Muse at Falkensward, and I was pretty blown away by him that day. I thought he was going to be a future world champion. Obviously, that didn't quite happen, but he's went to America, and him and Jet are dominating the 250 class in America. So congratulations to them. Fantastic career so far, but I'm sure they'll want more when they go to the 450. Plenty more wins.
And that's the other thing I think's maybe come out of this 2023 Supercross season. It was the new generation led by Chase taking on the older generation with Tomac and Webb. It looked like until that Achilles snap that the older generation still had the edge, probably just on experience.
Hmm.
But those last couple of rounds, it almost sped up the transfer of power to the young generation. So instead of having Eli, we don't even have Eli now. We're straight into the Jet Chase era. And Hunter will probably be on a 450, if not on Supercross next year by outdoors. You would class him as that new era as well. Even Ken Roxon, which I cannot believe, because I was there at his debut in Spain when he GP debut at 15. He's now 29. So it looks like in a click of a fingers, the the new generation is already here, and we're about to see a preview for that outdoors. Chase Sexton and Jet Lawrence could be here for the two guys battling for the next 5 years, it seems. And we've almost lost that extra wee bit that Eli Tomac was going to give us, and that straight away Cooper Webb will probably try to hang on as the older guy next year, but it looks like it's going to be Chase versus Jet, and we've almost fast forwarded into the new generation in about 3 weeks. it's
I
it's
know
moved that quick.
it's crazy how it all goes, how one injury can do that. But them guys need to stay healthy as well, especially in Supercross. As we were talking about injuries earlier, the thing about Supercross is all about time, and if you get one thing wrong, it can lead to a big injury. So you need to stay injury free in this game to win your titles, and there'll always be somebody coming up and somebody knocking on the door trying to get those wins and trying to challenge. So you never know, you never know. So, but it was certainly an entertaining Supercross season, that's for sure, and I'm definitely looking forward to the outdoors now.
Yeah, the ebbs and flow of the championship with those three guys was pretty good. Every time somebody looked like they got the momentum that wasn't called Eli Tomac, Tomac would wrestle it back. And then just when it looked like he had it secured, his Achilles snapped and Tom Webb was already out and Chase was there to pick up pieces. So if we can get more of that next year, it'll certainly be exciting. Just lastly, then, we'll have to mention it. Jeffrey Herlings is now the winningest, to coin an American phrase, MXGP rider ever. He's actually equal with Ricky Carmichael. We're making this before France, so he could actually even beat Ricky Carmichael's 102 outdoor wins, which would make him the guy that's won the most outdoor races of the elite level ever. He finally got it done. He had almost a year delay with the injury last year. Stefan still has the 10, and I don't think Jeffrey's going to race long enough to be able to get there unless he's able to put 5 championships together in a row. But I think in a way it maybe fits well that Stefan will have the 10 and Jeffrey has the winning record because Jeffrey is speed and he hasn't always played the long game. And I think he probably is the fastest GP rider ever. He might just be the fastest rider ever, any nationality in any series, in terms of versatility, in terms of proving you can do it on different ground, the sand, the rock, the hard pack, the different countries, South America. He's won in America as well, USGPs, AMA National. So if you take all that, obviously Stewart and Carmichael were amazing, but they raced in America. Could Jeffrey beat them in America? I don't know. But you put all those guys on a World Series, and you have to obviously take away injury to put Jeffrey in the World Series. But in terms of speed, I think even James Stewart, Ricky Carmichael, or Rick Johnson, Tortelli, Everts, they're going to find their hands are full trying to run with Jeffrey Herlings. And I think he
Yeah,
deserves that record.
yeah, I mean, what an all-time great. He's just ridiculous on a motocross bike. I mean, he's probably the fastest guy I've ever seen on a bike. Unbelievable. Especially if you ever see him in sand, it's just like ridiculous. But then you realize he's obviously not known for it, but it's still very, very hard to beat him in the hard pack tracks too when he's up to speed. Obviously this year, he's missed a full season coming in with pretty rusty, you would say, and he still won half the GPs, 3 out of 6, and he's not even brought his full A game yet, which is just shows you what those other guys are up against. He's a phenomenal rider, and he'd probably look back on his career and just wish he didn't have so many visits to the hospital bed, because my goodness, if he didn't, how many world titles would he have won? God knows.
And a lot of his injuries didn't even come in the races. He broke his leg on an 85. He got hurt doing a photo shoot last year. He broke his foot when he didn't crash in practice going into the 2019 season. So there's 3 already. That puts him on 8. He wins this one, it's 9, and he's only won 7. But we must also say Everts lost at least 2 championships due to injury himself in 2000 1999, and you could argue 1992 as a rookie when he burst his spleen on the 250. So he had his own injury issues to cope with. But I think Everts, we've just talked about, his legacy isn't just the 10 titles, it's the technique that riders are still putting into play, those standing up, balls of the feet, and all that, still in play now. But also Jeffrey's speed, I think he's going to set a record that may never be broken. I mean, it took 14 many years, 10, nearly 20 years to beat Stefan's record. Stefan broke Joe Robert's record in 2000. I think that lasted from 1970 or in around there of the 50 odd GP wins. So Herlings has got his legacy secured now. I think he deserves that for the level he's ridden at, the speed he's brought. But I don't see who's going to beat his GP win record, because he still says he's going to race for another 3 seasons. This season isn't even over. And he's already 102 wins. So I think whatever happens with World Championship titles, that legacy of those GP wins will signify to the next generations just how fast he was.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very, very tricky to break his GP win record, but if the level drops or whatever and somebody special comes along, and what is impressive for me is that Jeffrey has all these GP wins with the level. I mean, the level is unbelievable these days.
And he beat
Absolutely
Crowley. Like, he was
phenomenal.
racing
Yeah,
Crowley to do a lot of those wins,
yeah,
and
yeah. That year
Roxon,
was,
Musk, and
yeah,
whoever else in
it's just
MX2,
scary. Even at the moment, you've got Renault. Well, obviously he's injured now, but before his injury, you've got Fevre and Prado. These guys aren't hanging about in a motocross bike, that's for sure. So for him to get these GP wins in this era is just remarkable. Really, it's jaw dropping. Just even if somebody does break the record, I can't imagine another rider being around like Jeffrey Herlings again in the future. They just don't make them like him these days. You know, with the injuries he's picked up, and then somehow still managed to win the GP and the same given weekend. I mean, you look back to Latvia a few years ago, he got his already injured ankle run over, and then he went out in Monomoto, and then at Oss a couple of years ago when Ivo Monticelli landed on him. I think he broke his shoulder, but I think he won the GP overall that day, didn't he? And then there was the one in Mexico where he had the broken leg, but he
and
came
nearly
back
won
to
the
try
title.
nearly. I mean,
It
if it
was
had been
madness.
5 minutes shorter, he would have won that
Yeah.
title. I mean, the pain that man can go through is just next level.
And
It's
don't forget, he
ridiculous.
was temporarily paralysed a couple of years ago as well, and he
Yeah,
still came
yeah,
back to the sport. I mean, he's financially secure. See, he just raced Fox Hill there. He doesn't need to do that. He's raced every weekend, I think, from Hawkstone, the week before Hawkstone in February. So his desire to win, his dedication to win, and his ambition to be the greatest, or at least one of the greatest, is still there after all the injuries. I mean, he's winning from 15 years old, a bit like Ken Roxon, who's still racing himself. You think those guys at their late 20s have maybe only been racing 10 years, 12 years, but they're racing the guts of 15 seasons now. I think it's important to remember that, because they started so young.
yeah,
Really, guy in his at 33 that started at 20. I think he's had a good career, 35. But the equivalent is really Herlings and Rocks, and that's where they are right now in their careers. So to be still winning for both of them, it's pretty impressive. But we'll end it there. So congratulations to Jeffrey Herlings on the GP win record. Congratulations to Chase Sexton on his first 250, I was going to say, but 450 Premier Class Supercross Championship. And we'll look forward to the outdoors now. Of course, World Supercross coming up as well. Some good names headlined by Ken Roxon there, and fingers crossed Roxon's knee will be fine for Villa Park on the 1st of July. Colt Nicholas, Cole Seeley, a few other good names as well. Max Anstey, Dean Wilson for the British fans. We've that to look forward to as well. But for now, Jeffrey Herlings and Chase Sexton are making the headlines, along with the sad state of affairs for Eli Tomac. But I think his legacy in terms of championships and an all-time greater are consolidated regardless of that heartache at the end of 2023 Supercross. So for now, Andy, all the best, and France this weekend.
yep. Buzzing for France. Let's go.
See you then.